Pakistan, over the years, has been the place where matches tend to get drawn and lots of runs are scored, and that's it. But last time, on some very flat pitches, 3-0, runs scored at a fantastic rate, great entertainment, and with England prevailing.
506 runs on the first day of the series. I can barely believe I'm still saying it. I remember, Atif, we were in the back of the commentary box and in that first morning session, and you said something like, well, if England go on scoring at this rate, they'll score something like 480. And I said, don't be ridiculous. You'll get 480 in a day's test cricket. They got 506.
Yeah, it was an extraordinary day. And it's also worth remembering, they didn't get through their full 90 overs that day either. It was something like 500 off 78 and 79 overs, something like that. It's also worth remembering Pakistan came back reasonably well in that with their own reply. They didn't play at the rate that England did, but they sort of scored sort of in the late 400s, and then England made a very sort of aggressive declaration and then bowled out Pakistan to win the test in thrilling fashion. It did go on to be more one-sided than that, but it really was a day one big statement from an England team feeling really bullish, really aggressive and just wanting to take the tour by the scruff of the neck. That was mission accomplished on day one.
I mean, it was one of the flattest pitches I've ever seen. And I think if England hadn't been playing in that match and the match had kind of gone its normal course, it would have been absolutely castigated as a terrible surface to play Test cricket on, because it was so batsman friendly. It was nothing for the bowlers whatsoever. But they scored their runs so quickly. And we were sort of moaning, I think, well, probably me, that England probably ended up with about 600, and I thought, well, hang on a minute, that's not enough on a surface like this. What were they doing? They were being so careless. But it would have, it could easily have been castigated as one of the worst pitches of all time. But in fact, it ended up producing a last day thriller with an astonishing amount of runs scored throughout, because of the way England had batted, and this was the new Stokes regime. And they continued in that vein, or on pitches where they were a little bit more for bowlers as the series progressed. But not. It wasn't like playing in Bangladesh sometimes, or Sri Lanka or India, where the ball turns quite sharply. That wasn't the case. It was just a little bit more help as the matches proceeded. But every game was a source of fascination, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Pakistan weren't that far away, actually, from beating England in the second test match. Because of the way England played, England almost sort of, they dangled the carrot a bit. They certainly did in the first test, because I remember, you're talking about being a bit grumpy. I remember perhaps one or two of us going back to the hotel after that Stokes declaration going into the final day of the Rawalpindi test match, going, well, he's left them not enough runs here. They'll knock those off quite comfortably. Or they got good, you score that many runs in the first innings and you let the opposition in with a chance. But actually, it proved to be a perfect declaration that dangled the carrot, and Pakistan couldn't win that game. They weren't that far away from winning the second game, and then they were crushed in the third. So England winning 3-0, a memorable series. I think, I don't know how you saw it, Atif. I think about expectation for English eyes. You think, well, you can't win in 3-0 in Pakistan. You can't play that way in Pakistan. So that was why it was memorable for us. But so can England do something similar this time? I presume that they will attempt something similar.
I would expect them to do something similar based on what Pakistan's managed to achieve in the interim period. So England have gone from strength to strength. I know there was the blemish this summer against Sri Lanka, but you take that away from it, they've been flawless, really. They've played exciting cricket, aggressive cricket, and overall very successful cricket in test matches, certainly. Pakistan have gone the other way and have regressed, and they haven't won a test match in the last 10 test matches they've played at home, which is a shocking record for any side in modern cricket. You think about modern test cricket, everybody at home is strong, right? India is strong at home, Australia is strong at home, England strong at home, but Pakistan are looking exceptionally weak at home. 2024 has been their worst calendar year, I would say, in their history. And I was talking to senior journalist Peter Oborne about this recently. He said, well, there was a tour in 1962, a year in 1962, which was quite tricky. I said, well, I don't know, Peter, I wasn't around then, but I can tell you this.
I can remember it.
I can tell you 2024, I mean, it started with being whitewashed by Australia, albeit away from home. It progressed onto a shocking World Cup campaign where they would lose to the United States, maybe their biggest loss of all time. Just before that, they'd lost to Ireland in a T20 for the very first time. They came to England. They were soundly beaten by England in the 2 of the 4 games that actually took place, and 2 of them were washed out. They went back to Pakistan and they were whitewashed by Bangladesh. They hadn't lost a match to Bangladesh up until this point, and now they'd been whitewashed by them 2-0. Their preparation has been all over the place. I mean, they've had a shocking test loss, big test series against England, a team that whitewashed you 2 years ago. They decided to prep for it by organising a 50-over domestic competition for the very first time, which looks, which a lot of people have viewed as a sort of vanity project of the board and things like that. The preparation has been a long way short, and I think the smart money is, again, on another whitewash.
So this one-day tournament is really, it's kind of like preparation for the Champions Trophy.
Yeah.
That's the idea behind it. And actually, the other thing that's going on as well, the preparation for the Champions Trophy, they're rebuilding all the stadiums. So it means that England playing 2 test matches in Multan, not playing in Karachi, not playing in Lahore, say, and the last test is in Rawalpindi.
Like, the logistics are shocking, Simon. I understand that you're looking to host a major tournament. There's still question marks over whether the entirety of the Champions Trophy will be hosted in Pakistan. I think most people agree probably won't be because of the India scenario. So, to tie up all 3 of your major cricketing stadiums simultaneously in renovation projects at the start of your season, of your home season, it feels like someone's made a huge logistical error. Like that, it's absurd when you think about it. You've got a tour of England coming. People have booked their tickets. There's touring groups. There were so many touring groups in 2022 that are, investing a lot of their revenue, a lot of their, they're investing into the Pakistani economy. It's a win-win for Pakistan. But they've made them feel, they've isolated them further. They've had to rejig the schedule, as you say. We didn't know where the second test was going to be 3 weeks before the start of the first test. It's really unacceptable, and they've just not held themselves to account. They've forgiven themselves and said, well, look, we're renovating our stadiums. Look at this wonderful 50-over competition. Look at the crowds in Faisalabad who are coming out to watch this tournament. Their priority doesn't seem to be fostering a strong test team to really challenge England. They seem to be looking beyond that to the Champions Trophy. It doesn't bode well. There was a bit of discussion about Shan Masood as well, whose captaincy record now reads played 5, lost 5, 2 whitewashes. There was a bit of discussion. Maybe it's time for Shan to step aside. And the cynical thinking is they didn't want to replace him at this point because it's likely that this is going to be another 3 losses. So do you want a new captain to start with another 3 losses, or do you want to just tag them onto Shan's record? I know it sounds absurd, like we're all sort of laughing about it, but this is the prevailing conjecture amongst Pakistan cricket fans and journalists that the preparation, the prioritising in Pakistani cricket this year, the backroom issues, the personnel issues, the standoffishness, the players being played off against each other. There's so many issues that have just come together and created this horrible perfect storm from a Pakistani perspective and resulted in their worst year yet. This tour could make it a lot worse.
Or you could think, well, what have we got to lose? That's the other side of it. I mean, England are going there, and they're arriving on Wednesday and starting the first test on Monday. It seems astonishing, that, Victor, doesn't it?
Well, it is by old money, yes. Although, having said that, on my playing tour of the Pakistan, we flew from Christchurch, New Zealand, I think, or somewhere in New Zealand, Auckland. We didn't have a game before the first test, and we played the first test, and we lost it.
Well, there we are.
But I'm not. So I'm just saying it's not entirely unprecedented there. Yeah. And this, mind you, and this batch of players, not just English players, but are now conditioned to doing that, to zooming in, getting in the nets,
even with
getting on the golf course, and then playing a test match.
Even with this tighter turnaround, though?
Well, I suppose you could argue that, but there's a couple of players who are out of swing, if you like, which is Zach Crawley, hasn't played for a long time, injury, and obviously captain. But Ben Stokes hasn't played for a while, injury. But actually, you look down the others and you're thinking, Harry Brook, he's just been out there. Duckett, he's just got a nice 50, looks in pretty good nick. Smith's been keeping, probably do with a bit of a rest, but he's still going strong. So they are much more flexible, the modern player. This notion of, you arrive and you play 3 warm-up games, you get used to conditions, hasn't applied for some time now.
I suppose what I'm thinking about is the contrast more.
Yeah.
The contrast between the cold back end of an English season into the heat of Multan. What's the weather going to be like in Multan Atif, at that time of the year?
From what we've been told, we're looking at sort of 40 degrees in the daytime and sort of 33 in the evenings, and it's very hot and very humid as well.
You've got to be careful with the running there, all right, Simon?
So yeah, maybe indoors in the gym, I reckon, Simon. But I mean, this is it. Like, I mean, that's the first 2 Test matches. Then things will be a little bit cooler, only a little bit cooler in Islamabad. It'll still be quite warm. Which is quite nice, really. It'll be a nice ambience, but at the same time, very challenging for players. As you say, the contrast between a wet and like a sort of it's quite chilly today here in Bristol. So wet and chilly, and then switching straight over. And I know there's not a huge amount of overlap in the teams that are going over. But players like Harry Brook will be there, Ben Duckett will be there. Players will have that idea of moving from one extreme to another. But again, as Vic says, I think players are very much conditioned to getting on a plane and landing and playing, and you don't get that practice fixture with the President's 11. You don't get that, combined universities fixture anymore. Like, teams are going over there to almost commercially. Let's play our 3 Test matches as quick as we can and come home.
And I suppose you could argue that both sides will be equally unprepared in many ways.
Without a doubt.
England, we know how England will play with the same approach as last time. Nothing has much changed there. It's particularly in terms of their batting. They may be a bit more measured, actually, but they're still, they're Ducketts and the Crawleys. If they get in, and the Brooks, they're going to play their shots and go for it. And we may not get 500, but we might get 442 or something on a day's play. More interesting in a way is how they go about the bowling. Because remember last time, one of the surprises and stroke features, there was Anderson and the disappeared Ollie Robinson, who A, took wickets, but B, went at about 2 and over and tormented and kind of ground away getting their wickets. Well, England don't have that sort of attack this time. It's a fresh, faster, but far less experienced bowling attack around whichever spinners they play. So it'll be a different England in the field than it was last time, where those seamers, very often to fairly sensible, i.e. not lots of cordon of 4 slips in a gully, actually managed to control things and eke out wickets through persistence, pressure, cunning bits of changes, catches off the face of the bat rather than the edge.
Stephen Finn's here now. Stephen, we were talking about this off air actually, and we touched on it just now about players adapting suddenly to going from cool to hot. You would say it's especially a problem for the bowlers, you think?
It's hard work for the bowlers. It's a shock to the system when you've been bowling in 7 or 8 degrees and only 10 overs maximum, having days off in between games, to then having to go and bowl 20 overs on a Test match day and then pull up and do it again. And you rely on experience when you have to go and do that. If you haven't got the preparation, you look at England's side, I think there's only one seamer, Chris Wokes, who would have played an overseas Test match in the subcontinent before. So he is the only person who has any bank of knowledge there about what bowling in those conditions is like as well. So yeah, there's going to be challenges for this England team. I mean, they've flown in the face of many challenges or things that we've thought will be challenging for them over the course of the last 2.5 years. But yeah, as a former bowler, if I was playing an ODI today and I was playing a Test match in 7 or 8 days' time, I'd be a touch concerned that I'd be undercooked and underdone going into that.
Yeah, of course, the other thing we've forgotten about last time, talking about the sudden transition, is because that first Test match was nearly delayed, wasn't it? Because of the sickness in the England camp. Well, there was talk about it. Remember that?
Yeah.
They were not going to play. We're going to have to delay the Test match for a day because no one's fit at all. I mean, there's that issue as well. Anyway, we'll see how it plays out in terms of that turnout. What's going to be the 2 teams going to be? I was just trying to pick the England side. And with Ben Stokes coming back, of course, in a way it slightly unbalances the team because he can't bowl. I mean, if he can bowl, it's perfect balance, but he can't bowl. So we presume that they're going to go, the 7 batters, including Jamie Smith. So Stokes comes back, Crawley comes back, presumably, but then he hasn't played for a long time. That's what I'm thinking. And then so it'll then have to be 4 bowlers with plus Joe Root. So are we thinking 3 pace bowlers and a spinner, or 2 spinners and 2 pace bowlers? And if we are thinking that, who are they going to be?
Well, a lot of it depends on Stokes' fitness, doesn't it? I think that you always look at that balance of the team and how much more balanced or better balanced the team seems and looks when Ben Stokes is able to fulfil a full role as a third seamer, if he is fit and if he is capable of bowling 10, 15 overs a day, then you would say that it would be a 2 seamers, 2 spinners lower order, you would imagine, with Joe Root supporting. But it all does depend. He's not going to have had the opportunity to be able to see if he can bowl 15 overs in a day of a test match. And that's going to be the challenge. But I would anticipate that Ben Stokes, the Lionheart that he is, will know that he has to step up under these circumstances as long as he's fit enough. And bowl those 10 to 12 overs, and I think that will balance the attack far better.
Yeah, if he is fit to bowl in that first test.
Well, they might have a decision to make. There was some talk, someone was talking about the fact that Pakistan have wanted to play on more seamer-friendly pitches, and that might dictate that if that's the case, you'll go in with 3 seamers.
Yes.
And Joe Root is better than just a sort of casual help out. He's actually bowled quite a lot in Test cricket overseas, and often bowled really quite well. He's not far from being a full all-rounder.
No, I would agree with that. The only problem is that with Bashir being the number 1 spinner as an off spinner, you want some degree of variety in there. And if you have Root and Bashir as the 2 spinners, you need the wrist spin in there, I think, of Rahan as well.
And without wanting to get
Leach
too far down the sort of spinner line, it makes a huge difference in the modern game, to a greater extent than in the older game, I think, is the ratio of left-handers and right-handers. Because in the modern game, I promise you, for the left-arm spinner, you take Leach's record, for example, it is infinitely better against right-handers than left-handers. So I'm just trying to... So you're going to have a quick look at the Pakistan lineup, and there are a few left-handers knocking around, obviously, with the captain and the little left-handers, Shakil.
Abdullah Shafiq, yeah.
Yeah. So that will be a factor in selection, I would have thought. You can't just go on, he's number 1, he's number 2, but hang on, if we're playing against a side with 6 right-handers, it's slightly different than one with 3 or 4 left-handers.
The TMS Podcast from BBC Radio 5 Live.
Is there a scenario in which England go there and they say, actually, well, this pitch looks flat, we need more bowling than batting, and therefore leave a batter out? So Zach Crawley hasn't played for a couple of months, and say, well, actually he needs a bit of time, so you might rejig it a bit. I don't know, Ollie Pope perhaps opens up and England plays 6 batters and 5 bowlers if Stokes can't bowl.
I mean, it would have to look very flat if that was the case, but you'd have to ask Chris Woakes to bat at 7, which is not absurd. It'll be a ticklish little problem when the selectors sit there. OK, which one of these boys are we going to leave out then?
Yeah, well, and I think you look at it and the troubles that England had against Sri Lanka in that series, where with Dan Lawrence opening the batting, not a conventional opener, you don't want to disrupt that balance of the side. So you're looking at that opening partnership, and one of the real positives of the batting unit over the last 2.5 years has been that continuity of Duckett and Crawley at the top of the order. So England will be desperate for them to come back together. So I don't think it would be Duckett that misses out, and you'd have to be a brave man to leave someone else out there out of that top 7, but the pitches may necessitate that at some stage.
And I wonder after this summer whether England might have just, they said, OK, Lawrence is our man, because he's been the next on the rank, who's never opened a batting hardly ever in his life. And I wonder whether they might rethink that mode of thinking.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Pakistan team that we're expecting. After a quick thought from Zoltz, what did you want to say?
Just on the left hand, just Saud Shakil and the captain Shan Masood in the top 8, the expected top 8 that we have for Pakistan in this series. Also, we'll talk about their recent form, but some of their key players have really been struggling. Babar Azam, since England were last in Pakistan, 9 tests, just 1 half century, none in his last 8 tests, averaging under 30 in that time. Abdullah Shafiq, who'd made a brilliant start to his test career, got 100 in the Royal Pindi test last time, very little since then. So they've got fairly big problems in their batting lineup. Just picking up on what you were saying about the last tour, looking at the relative performance of the pace and spin attacks, the spinners sort of cancelled each other out. Pakistan spinners 35 wickets, average 36. England's 33 wickets, average 37. The seamers, Pakistan seamers, 11 wickets in the series, averaged just under 63, and England's collectively took 26, averaged 23. But as you said, none of those bowlers will be on this tour, so that was really the key difference between the sides last time.
And well, this is where there's a slight upside for Pakistan this time around, at least in terms of personnel. They've got Shaheen Afridi available to them. They've got Naseem Shah available to them. Now, I would say, the previous time they had Muhammad Ali, who was making his debut, and he looked like it. And alongside him, they had Haris Rauf opening the bowling for Pakistan. Shaheen and Naseem look infinitely a stronger pairing to start your bowling attack, especially if you're going to theoretically get a seam-friendly wicket. We'll see if that actually materialises. I don't know if I believe it. I'll believe it when I see the first ball hit a length and move away from the right-hander. I say theoretically because both of their form has dropped off as well. I mean, Andy talked about Babar Azam's form, and his average has gone from 55 to 45 over the course of 2 very lean years in Test cricket. He's also had a lean time in white ball cricket as well, and it just shows that how important he is to Pakistan's success, because when he's not scoring runs, they're losing in a big way. Shaheen equally has been far from his best. His pace has dropped off considerably. He's not bowled above 90 miles an hour since probably those 2 balls I saw him bowl in the 100 for the Welsh Fire a couple of seasons ago. It feels like 100 years ago now, when he bowled out KL Rahul and Rohit Sharma in that T20 World Cup in 2021. He's just not found his form. Now, there's a lot being talked about the players that they've brought in this time around. So Khurram Shahzad is not available to them, even though he had a very good run against Bangladesh. Like he took 6 wickets in the second innings, bowled brilliantly, with an older ball, not a lot going on, and he was really good. But Amir Jamal is going to be taking his place. Now, Amir Jamal had a terrific tour against Australia last winter, where he managed to take a lot of wickets, looked very impressive, bowled with pace, with bounce. He was subsequently signed by Warwickshire to play in the T20 Blast as a replacement, and couldn't bowl faster than 71 miles per hour. So clearly carrying an injury of some sort, wasn't selected most of the time while he was here. Maybe he's recovered and he's going to be bowling full as fast and as well as he was before, but it's a gamble. The problem for Pakistan at the moment is obviously there's issues off the field, but there's issues on the field. Their best players are woefully out of form, and even sort of psychologically. Like, if we just explore Shaheen for a second, he was made captain of Pakistan's white ball team in the aftermath of the 50-over World Cup, with Pakistan, had a terrible campaign. Babar Azam was sidelined, right? You will just be playing, and Shaheen is going to be the captain. They play 5 matches against New Zealand. They lose that tour 4-1, I beg your pardon. And Shaheen is immediately dismissed as captain, and Babar is brought back as captain for the T20 World Cup. What is that going to do for the relationship between your 2 star players when you keep playing them off against each other in this captaincy rank? They've both made sort of statements which are, unconvincing about being cordial and things like that. But if you're going to put your best players in a negative frame of mind, if you're going to give them things to think about that aren't related to what's on the pitch, then you're going to be in real trouble. It's difficult, as you say. It might all come together. England have some issues as well to address, but I would say Pakistan's are more deeply rooted and harder to overcome. Is what I would suggest.
So what do we think Pakistan's batting lineup's going to be then?
I think, again, sort of Shan Masood at the top, probably alongside Abdullah Shafiq opening the batting. You got Saud Shakil and Babar Azam in that middle order. Almost certainly Mohammad Herrera is going to come into the side in that middle. You got Mohammad Rizwan there as well, which gives it a little bit of depth, your batting lineup. But really, it's going to really stop there. I mean, Sarfraz Ahmed is in the squad as well. It's possible that Sarfraz, the wicketkeeper, former captain, plays as a specialist batter because his form has been very strong in domestic cricket, and he's never been away from the squad. He's always been there or thereabouts. Salman Ali Agha is a batter I would encourage you to keep your eye on. Very good. Usually comes in at sort of 6 or 7, but very, very, resourceful, and just one of those players who can squeeze you runs at the back end of an innings. The big surprise inclusion was Norman Ali, who hasn't played Test cricket for a long time, was drafted back into this side, which, I mean, if you read into that, it implies that actually we're not going to get seam-friendly wickets, we're going to get spin-friendly wickets. They've already got Abrar Ahmed, who's almost certain to play.
Well, we saw him last time, didn't he? Came in and he was
Abrar, he bowled pretty well.
Yeah,
he sort of charged up Pakistan. He took several wickets in his debut test at Multan, the second test, and a lot of people questioned his lack of inclusion in the first test. But they've got Norman as a backup. He's not the most, with the greatest respect, not the most inspiring spinner in the world. But it sort of gives you an indication into their plans. It's very hard to know what they're going to prepare for England. if they've even thought about it in a lot of detail, because obviously in their mind they're thinking about their balance sheet, and their balance sheet is reflected by the Champions Trophy and the success in white ball cricket, and that's what the mass audience in Pakistan cares about. Test cricket is almost like a niche thing, right? This is the mentality that you're sort of fighting against in Pakistan. I think even if you offered most Pakistan cricket fans, you get whitewashed again, 3-0, but you get to the final of the Champions Trophy. They're taking it, and the board is acutely aware of that, and it's showing in their preparation.
So on these pitches, do you think we will get some seamer-friendly pitches? I mean, did you watch the Bangladesh series?
I did.
And just characterise the pitches that they produced.
So it was the same venue for both test matches, and there was a little bit of swing. There was a little bit of seam and swing movement as the days went on. It wasn't what I'd characterise as like a deliberately seam swing friendly pitch, but even the sort of hints of movement and things like that you got from bowlers really bending their back and really hitting the seam positioning and all that kind of stuff, all the things that you sort of expect from a technical perspective from swing bowlers. They did that right. They got a little bit of movement, but I would say something like 90% of the dismissals were false shots, were batters fishing outside the off stump or looking to break the shackles or trying to maneuver. Like there wasn't that kind of highlight delivery that you would see posted on Instagram. There wasn't a lot of that. There were bowls there, for sure there were bowls there, but the ones where you can, a bit like Will Jacks's dismissal today, you can sort of point it and say, yeah, it was a good ball, but at the same time, look at the gap between bat and pad, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to prepare, to be honest with you. So I just don't know, because there's no long-term planning. Like, if they were going to say, like, we're going to commit to seam-friendly conditions, you want to do that over the course of a year, 2 years, something like that. Give your team time to adjust and get ready for it. But there's such a knee-jerk reaction culture there at the moment that this is working, so let's do that. This doesn't work, so let's not do that. It's very hard for anybody to settle into anything, and it's equally difficult for someone like us to sit here and predict what we're going to see. My instinct says to me they will be sort of more spinny than seamy pitches, but we'll see.
I can't remember seeing much green grass in Pakistan on the middle. And like Atif, I don't expect to see verdant pitches like the outfield we're looking at Bristol now. But as we know, you go to Pakistan, and most preconceived ideas get tossed out the window within about 10 days.
10 minutes.
And it's always fascinating. I mean, I haven't been on many dull tours of Pakistan. I remember going back to, winning in the dark. Sain's lot winning in the dark. Sadly, I'm happily not there when Gat and Shakir Rana had their little thing at about 2 minutes to 6. So although it's got this reputation of producing some big dull matches, you don't get many of them nowadays. So I think it's worth tuning in, and I'm looking forward to listening to you, Simon.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. Results?
We're just on Pakistan's home form. They haven't won in their last 10 home tests. 6 defeats, including those 3 against England and the 2 against Bangladesh. Also lost the deciding test against Australia. 4 draws in their last 10 tests. So the last time Pakistan failed to win in a 10-test sequence at home, you've got to go back to the late 60s and early 70s, and over an 11-year period they didn't win in 11 matches, but 10 of those were draws, and they lost 1 to New Zealand in Lahore. Cricket was rather different then, and skull-crushingly negative.
Too much T20 cricket in the 60s.
So if I asked you to name England's bowling attack for the first test in Multan, what are you going for? Are we going for Bashir, Leach, Atkinson and...
Well, after pondering, I've actually changed my mind. I don't think... I think Leach is more likely to play as the frontline spinner. I think Bashir, the reason he's been the frontline spinner here is because his height, his ability to bowl a really consistent length with bounce and trouble people on pitches that aren't spinning. But Jack Leach has bowled brilliantly in the last month of the championship. He's won Somerset single-handedly a few games. I think that the weighted...
Let's not belittle Archie Vaughan.
No, of course. Oh, Archie Vaughan, get him on the plane. Why not? But I actually think Leach could well be the number 1 spinner, and I think it'll be Atkinson, Wokes, and probably Potts, I would say. It'd be Potts or Cast for that last seamers spot, I think.
Well, I think that's possible, and especially if they don't think it's going to turn significantly.
Yes.
If they think it's just going to be a dry, true, batsman-friendly pitch,
Which typically they are there, aren't they?
then I think they would certainly prefer the combination of an off-spinner and a left armour, and that off-spinner might be Joe Root. Once Stokes gets fit, if he's fit, then that gives, as we've been saying, so much more flexibility. You could play Bashir and Leach, let's say, and we haven't talked about Rian Ahmed. Rian Ahmed had he got a lot of wickets actually
in Karachi
at the end. But he's always your sort of wild card that you'll bring in for the last Test match when you really need to win it, and you'll have a go. And if he goes at 7 and over, never mind, he might bowl him out or get a few.